Hey there, and welcome to Money and You. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host. My search for more fulfilling work led me to career and business coaching, where I stumbled upon a game-changing discovery. Money issues often start with our mindset and habits. You see, our relationship with money is the key to overcoming those frustrating financial obstacles. As an entrepreneur, coach, and problem solver, I'm passionate about helping you create a great relationship with money. Because, turns out, that's the foundation for a limit-free life. Each week on Money and You, I speak with amazing guests about all things money, mindset, practical tips, and everything in between. We're here to give you new insights, education, and empowerment so money can be one of your favorite relationships. So join us for some lively conversations and let's transform your financial life together. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and very excited. We are continuing on our little journey here into career development, career transition. We're talking all things career in both the last show we did and this one, and I think it's like the perfect timing for this. So much is going on. People are a little uncertain in terms of their jobs right now. And, you know, we've had quite a crazy ride between the pandemic and everything going on now. And so I think it's always great to stay on top of where your career is. If you're happy in it, wonderful. If it's all working out and you feel very stable, that's great. But not everybody feels that way. And so I really am thrilled to have the guest that we have today to talk about how to prepare for a career change and, you know, just how to look at your whole professional life. It's complicated, and, you know, we're all building professional lives, most of us, and it's important to us. So we want to do it in you know, the most productive way we can to get us where we want to go. So I have a fabulous guest today, and super excited to have her on. Her name is Katrice Miller, and Katrice has quite a background. She has been is a lawyer and corporate leader with 27 years of experience in leadership roles with companies like Microsoft, Starbucks, and Amazon. She's also an educator with 10 years of teaching experience with colleges and universities. She's an entrepreneur, founder, CEO, corporate consulting group, and helping individuals build powerful brands, expand job opportunities, and increase earning power. She's also a professional speaker with 15 years delivering keynote speeches and inspiring students. So Katrice, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you here. And I remember when I first saw your bio, it was amazing. And there's so much that you do. So I feel very grateful that you can take the time to be with me and with the listeners today, because you are truly a wealth of knowledge. And we also connected in terms of career coaching, which is how I started my business, and just something I love. I love helping people to find work they love, because I think that is such an important aspect of life. Not everybody agrees with me, but I feel like you're just, if you can find fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful work that you enjoy, it just is such a huge aspect of one's happiness and love for their lives. So anyway, that's me. But so you must have a little of that as well, or a lot, because you moved into this career coaching realm as well. So do you want to speak a little to how you got here?
Sure. So I totally agree. I can relate back to my early career where my main focus was paying my bills, making sure my rent was paid, making sure my children were taken care of. And I definitely think that's a space that many of your listeners may be in at that stage in your life. But as you progress in your career, you start looking for something more meaningful. You want to move beyond just, surviving and making sure you're able to financially take care of yourself. You're looking for fulfillment. So what I always tell people, when you get to that stage, you want to apply what I call this ABC concept, where you're looking for something that meets your ability, something you're actually good at. That's the A. You're able to excel in it based upon your skills. B, it's beneficial to you, meaning you could be great at it, but if you hate it, what is the point of it, right? So looking for the benefit to you. And then C, the compensation. That's the sweet spot. When you're able to meet the ability, the benefit, and the compensation, that is your ideal career and the career path you want to move forward towards.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And it's an interesting topic because I don't know about you, but one of the harder things for people that I've seen is just that question of what do you want? And I think when people have worked hard, for example, lawyers to get through law school and then to start that career and engage in it, and you get very engrossed. And it's very, you sort of, I find this with many, especially corporate executives, you're so busy being good at your job that you lose track of yourself. And when you're faced with either a layoff or a change that you want, and somebody asks you, what do you want next? A lot of people don't know. And do you find that?
Yes, I think that is really prevalent in law because in law, there's a course that they tell you should follow. You should graduate, you should work at a law firm, you should aspire to become partner and then equity partner, and that is the path. And if you venture off the path, something is inherently wrong with you. You're not following the right path. That I also find that in other areas. I find that in government, where people who have been in the government, who have served long tenures there, have a specific path. And then now when that path is no longer there, either by self-choice, now they want to do something different, or by force, there's a layoff or a shutdown. The question becomes, what do I do now? How do I find my way when the path is no longer visible or desirable to me? So I think it's something that so many of your listeners and just people in general are facing now, trying to figure out what is my desired path for moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a tough question. It's a simple question, but it's a challenging question. And, I think because part of it, especially if you've done something like law, there's this undercurrent of, I put all this time and effort into this and I've invested so much and how can I leave this? There's a lot of, and I say this every time I talk about these kinds of things, but there's all this social commentary. We hear our parents in our head, we hear society in our head, we hear our friends telling us, we're so lucky to have this, how could we possibly leave it? I mean, it's very hard to just kind of clear the decks to be able to just reach inside and see what is actually right for you.
Yeah, and I think the challenge to that should be that you're not abandoning everything that you've done. You're not totally ditching those years of, experience. You're not ditching that time and the effort that you've invested in that career. You're instead pivoting from that and you're taking that expertise and doing something new and different.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think a lot of this is about shifting perspective, just like it is with money. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking about people's money beliefs and perspectives. It's the same thing with your career. It didn't used to be this way. So I think we're still dragging a lot of the old times when people stayed at a job for 40 years and didn't leave. There's that whole thing that we got from our parents that we're still hearing in our heads as well. But this is a different time and people do make a lot of changes. And so tell me a little about, kind of maybe a story that you have about a client who really wanted to change, but, what were some of the thoughts and the problems with, that person giving themselves permission to actually do it?
Sure. So I can actually think of one client who wanted to pivot out of the legal field and they wanted to go into a corporate role. And the challenge that they faced was that from the family, they were thinking, how can you abandon this great job at a law firm? You have preached to us for forever. This is what you want. Now, all of a sudden, you don't want to do it. So it was the pressure from the family. It was also pressure from society, from the peers, their peer groups, their peers in the industry who were on that same journey, who were thinking, Why would you want to go off track and do something different? So I worked with this person to help them, first of all, silence the noise.
Hmm.
You have to become very innate at focusing on what works best for you. This is your career, it's no one else's career. And also understanding that pivoting is not failing. Just because you do something different or you take a different path, that is not failure. And even if you're doing it because you're choosing to do so, not because the job is forcing you to do so, if you are making that conscious choice, that is not a sign of failure. It's actually a sign of brilliance, of owning your career and taking control of your destiny.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I don't think any of the job, things that can happen should be considered failures, whether that's, getting laid off or, whatever it is. I feel like all of it is just lessons on the path to wherever we're going. And oftentimes even layoffs, people will find, later that they're looking back going, thank God I got laid off. I never would have been here if I hadn't. I would have stayed at that job that I was, wasn't even so great. So, and there are people who lose dream jobs. I've talked to them too, and they are very sad to have lost that job that they really loved, actually. We talk a lot about people working in places they don't like and wanting to pivot, but there are people who lose jobs that they really are fond of, and they almost have to grieve that loss. So it really runs the gamut. But tell me a little about, there's so much psychology in all of this. It's, that's a huge part of it. So how do you navigate that when somebody is just not really believing in themselves after that? And even if they want to pivot and it's their own choice, they're still very, uncertain as to whether, they can do this thing they haven't done before.
Oh, yes, I think first you are correct. There is a grieving process that you need to acknowledge. If you are ending up in this circumstance, not by your own choice, you need to acknowledge that that is part of the process that you need to make sure that you are taking care of and that you are allowing yourself to feel that loss and it's okay to have that. Actually, it's very healthy to have that because you cannot move forward until you conquer those feelings. So I always tell clients, and most of the times what clients want to do is they want to jump right into the process. I need to find a new job. I need to move fast. And they are totally overlooking the emotional connection and the importance of that. So I would say, number one, make sure that you do that. And do that not for a long extended period of time, but long enough to acknowledge it so that you can move past it and that you can move forward. And what I always teach my clients is that even when they're in a space where they have the job and things are going well, you are not tied to that job. Your personal brand is defined by you and the skill set that you have and the expertise that you have built over the years. You are now loaning and lending those talents to XYZ Corporation. But when that position, if that position no longer is there, that does not mean your expertise and your value diminishes. It still is intact. So I think it starts well beyond that moment where the layoff happens. It's coaching yourself to understand that you are not defined by your position. And it's hard because, you're with a company for 20 years. You build professional, even personal relationships with your colleagues. They're like family. So it starts to become even harder to self-identify your own brand within those circumstances. But I always make sure I coach clients to always be mindful of that. So in the event that this happens, you're able to navigate and pivot well from it. So after we do, when we get past that moment, excuse me, that's when I say the real work begins. And that's when you start the process to now find what is your true calling and what is your next big move.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And you brought up a lot of things that I want to just talk about for a minute. This idea, and I've had this happen with a lot of higher level executives too, where the minute, they find themselves in a situation where they're not working, where they've worked maybe for decades, their first thing they want to do is do their resume. And that is, I mean, how would you even do your resume at that stage? You don't have any idea what your next objective is, really, unless you want to try to get the same exact position somewhere else. But they're very anxious to get going with this. And we really need that pause to, take a fresh look at your life and what you've done over these years and what you like and don't like. How do you start people when they come to you and, in that kind of state where they're, I know you don't jump into the resume first, but what do you do?
Absolutely. It starts with first identifying what is your next target role. It's not, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. I know you're having a little cold and I feel like I'm pressuring you to talk.
No, you're not pressuring me. It comes and goes. So my apologies. So it starts by identifying what is your target role going to be. And your target role isn't always the last job that you held. Your target role is the next position that you want to hold based upon the experience that you have and the career path that you have built in your career history. So before you could even build a resume, you have to figure out what role am I targeting? Because that's going to define how you move forward in your job search. So you're right. So many clients want to instantly jump into, let's fix the resume. Let's apply for 100 jobs a day. Yeah. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. You cannot just think of anything that you're aiming for. If you don't have a target, you're not going to hit your goal. So you need to look at your job search in the same way.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I know it almost becomes a little job unto itself, or a business where you do have a personal brand and you're trying to, build that. And then you need to spend the time and plan and think about all this. It is a process. It doesn't necessarily happen that quickly. And I think that's an expectation too, especially it seems like the more years you have behind you in the work world, the longer it takes to find that next position. So I don't know if that's true, but what, people do kind of want to know how long is this going to take? And you really don't know, but what are you seeing out there in terms of timing?
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's something that we just can't define. And that's one of the common questions that you get. How long will it take me to find a job?
Yeah.
And I think that so many people put the quantifying aspect on it. How long will it take? How many resumes do I need to submit? How many job applications do I need to fill out? That's going to then define the product, the end result that I get. And that's just not how this current job market is working. You need to focus more on quality versus quantity. And I know that's very hard when you're in the moment and you have the actual bills that are building up. Yeah. And you're trying to get past that, but you have to focus. You have to focus on the actual quality of the production of the job search. Now, when I say quality, I'm not talking about how you complete your resume or how you fill out a job application. I'm talking about the actual strategies, the underlying strategies for how you go about the process. Meaning, back in the day when I first started out, it may have been a numbers game then, where it was more beneficial to fill out 50 applications a day and actually have an Excel spreadsheet that said I did 50 today. Whereas today it's more about what connections can I make at those companies that could potentially give me an insight into getting hired. Actually, how can I make myself more visible to recruiters so that they can give me the actual inroads into the company? Now, that visibility comes from a few different ways you can do that. One of the leading ways to do it is on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an amazing platform that is so underutilized by so many career professionals. And what people don't understand now is that currently, the way that recruitment is going, and I'm sure many of your listeners have seen this, when there's a job posted on LinkedIn if you have, I think, LinkedIn Premium, not sure if the regular service does this, but it'll say as soon as you apply, there are 100 applicants who have applied for this job. So you immediately feel like, oh my gosh, what are my chances? Now, that actually is a low number. On the back end, having worked inside corporate, I can tell you there are thousands of people who have applied for those jobs. So what's happening now, but the good thing though is out of those thousand, literally half of them aren't even qualified because they're following that hit or miss strategy. Let me apply to everything possible. So even though the number is really high, 1,000 applicants doesn't mean 1,000 qualified applicants. So what's happening now, though, is that recruiters are seeing these high numbers and they're doing something called reverse recruiting on LinkedIn. They're using LinkedIn as a platform to go out and almost cherry pick and find qualified applicants reversely by those who have not actually applied for the job, but those who have their LinkedIn profile set up in a way that is going to be attractive to those recruiters. So that's one of those examples of, like I'm saying, quality versus quantity. So taking some time to actually putting in the effort to making sure your profile is set up in a way that you're going to attract recruiters. Because think about it like this. The recruiters aren't doing you a favor. Their job literally hinges upon finding qualified applicants. So as important as it is to you to land that job, it's just as important for them to land you in that job. Yes. So it's like, why don't you help them help you? Because it's a win-win for both parties. But that's just one example of quality over quantity. And sometimes an applicant may think, a job seeker may think, I don't have time to make my LinkedIn look pretty or make my LinkedIn look optimized. What does optimize even mean? They think it's just busy work, but really it can be extremely beneficial.
Oh, I so agree with you. And yeah, LinkedIn has changed a lot. When I started coaching, it was important, but it's really evolved. And now, not only is LinkedIn important, but networking is important. And LinkedIn is one of the best ways, it's a great tool for networking. And just the connections you can make at the places you might be interested in working, it's so valuable. So I agree. And I kind of love LinkedIn because unlike a resume, which is very structured and has a kind of a formal, kind of structure to it, and there's only so much you can put in there and you put it in a certain way. LinkedIn, you can do a whole narrative that really kind of, I think, shows a different layer of you. You can, inject a lot more personality into it. You can talk, about many things that don't have really a place on the resume. So what are some of your tips about how to do this, kind of improved LinkedIn profile?
Yes. So every part of LinkedIn, I want you to think of it as prime real estate. Every part is important. So many people think the important part of LinkedIn starts like in the middle, in the about section. But I challenge that thought. Really, it starts at the very top. Something as simple as your profile picture and your profile banner. The banner is that space behind your picture. And so many people just flat out ignore it and just put nothing. So that looks incomplete. Or they make the mistake of putting their employer back there. So if they work for PepsiCo, they have PepsiCo products back there. Now, I'm all about loving your job and doing a great job at your job. Unless you own PepsiCo, you should not have PepsiCo as your banner drop because this is your billboard. This is your personalized billboard to showcase yourself to recruiters if you're looking for a job. But even in times when you're not looking for a job, it's your personal billboard to showcase you and your expertise and your brand. So we at all times want to be showcasing who we are and what we add to the industry. So starting at the very top, making sure that we have something that is aligned with our industry and our expertise. If you don't know what that is, there are two things you can do. You can go to your peers, look for people who have the same job title as you, or colleagues, or just people in the industry. And if you don't know those people, you can just do a quick search on LinkedIn. So if you're Let's say you're HR manager. You can search HR managers and just get an idea of what types of backgrounds they have.
Mhm.
That can give you an idea. Or another great tool is actually going to Canva. Canva will have actual templates that you can use that are also size appropriate. So you don't have to worry about, the picture fitting in the banner and all that good stuff. So I would say start there because that shows your professionalism and it shows your branding. Then I would say you want to move to your actual headline. How are you identifying yourself in your headline? Your headline is the space right below your name. You should be identifying who you are, what your expertise in is, and what problem you solve in your headline.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That is great. And yeah, the headline is also very interesting because a lot of people just, when they're employed, they just sort of put their role and, something like that. But that's another space where you can put all kinds of things in there. You can, put dog lover at the end or whatever. A lot of people just, anything that can humanize you a little bit because everybody starts looking the same when they're looking for jobs. And you really don't want to look exactly like every other candidate.
Yes, I agree. And I think that translates to the about section as well. It starts in the headline, but as you move to the about section, this, as you alluded to, this is your opportunity to get away from the bullet points, to get away from the micro-sized little statements defining who you are as a career professional. Now you can tell a narrative, a story about who you are and make it more personalized, and that helps you show up better as well.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that word up again. I had spoken with another person, a little different audience in the career coaching space, and this idea of storytelling we talked about, and I just want to talk about it again because I don't think people realize the value of it. I always tell people, and they sort of say, "Yeah, that's a good idea," but they don't really know how to do it, and or I think really commit to doing it. It's really important. It's a little, it takes a little more effort. Maybe it really doesn't because the stories are all there in the back of your brain. You just have forgotten, the story of when you did this project and it went a certain way. I mean, these are all there, but sometimes as a coach, you have to kind of pull it out of people because they either have minimized it or forgotten about it. And so if you get into what they've actually done on their previous jobs or even in their life, it's amazing how many stories there are. And sometimes it's so funny. You'll have a client that you've worked with for some wild story that is just so perfect for telling to a potential employer. But, we have long, complicated lives, and sometimes we don't remember all the stories that we have to tell. So how do you help people to kind of find their stories that they could use in an interview?
Yeah, I think storytelling is so great because we're starting talking about it in the LinkedIn aspect, but it definitely does carry over into the interviews. Because I always say back in the day, because I've been in this industry for 30 plus years now, but I remember where interviews used to literally be, tell us what you did at your job. Yeah. Meaning, let me just define, basically regurgitate the bullet points. Mm-hmm. I did A, B, C, and D. Employers are no longer interested in that. They want to see, okay, everybody who was an HR manager did A, B, C, and D. Now tell us what impact you had when you did those job duties and what value did you bring to the company. And that's where storytelling comes in. So I would say learning how to tell great stories about your career is going to be critical to how you present yourself and critical in how you actually land the job. So I always recommend people practice that, identify the stories ahead of time, and actually practice that and find a way to be able to tell those stories in a conversational way, but not in a conversational way like you would at a cocktail party. There needs to be structure around the story, and there needs to be some very key identifying points. You need to be able to identify when you're speaking about your role at a previous organization, what was the specific problem that you had in that particular story? what actions did you take, and how did you solve those problems? So you're going to have it done in a conversational way, but you're going to have those very pivotal benchmark points throughout that story. Learning how to do that will greatly enhance your ability to succeed at interviews and land jobs.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And it does take a little practice. I talk to the dog, speak it to the mirror, whatever you need to do. But I find that these things, as silly as they feel when you're doing them, they do prepare you better, once you're sitting there having this conversation. I also wanted to ask you, the world has changed a lot since I was interviewing for real jobs. And there's a lot more, well, for one thing, there's virtual. There's also a lot more, it seems like to me, these sort of panel interviews or group interviews, which I never really had. And I'm sure there's a protocol for these. How do you coach people around these large group interviews?
Yes, panel interviews are actually quite common if you're looking for government work. In the federal government, particularly, they always use panel interviews. It's something that's a staple in that industry. But we're also finding it come up also in corporate spaces as well. What it does, you may wonder, well, why the panel interview? What's the structure? What's the behind the scenes rationale for it? It's an opportunity to have a group of individuals interview you at one time and then share notes on your performance. Now, this actually happens even if you don't have a panel interview. If you have multiple interviews, they still get together and share their notes and making their hiring decisions. It's just a way of streamlining the process that some organizations like, so they start to do that. Now, how do you prepare for it? You definitely need to prepare for panel interviews differently because your focus is going to be on more than just one person. The typical panel is 3. So it starts with not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. Human nature, if you're talking to someone, you're directing your eye contact to that person. So you tend to forget about the other 2 people on the end of the panels. So you need to consciously make sure, even if the middle person asks the question, they're asking for the group. So you need to make sure you're making eye contact with all of the parties who are on the panel to make sure that you're making that personal connection. Also, I find that candidates often feel that panel interviews are more overwhelming, they're more stressful, so they tend to forget the questions or they get flustered because they didn't quite understand what's being asked. It's okay to ask to repeat a question. It's better to ask to repeat the question instead of answering the wrong question. And I also found that in panel interviews, they often have these scenario-based questions where they're very in-depth. They're very top heavy in facts and information, and it's not a straightforward answer. So if you're the type of person who's good at shorthand or at notes, I always encourage people to bring pen and paper to an interview. You could even take little shorthand notes, or if it's a 3-part question, just jot down, the parts or whatever works for you, but you can use that to your advantage as well. But the key takeaway with panel interviews is making sure you are making that real human connection with everyone who's interviewing you. Now it's just times 3 or times 4, however many people are actually on the panel.
Yeah, thank you. It is more daunting. It is. I do think it makes people more nervous, and I see why. And that's another great use of LinkedIn is when you find out who's going to be on the panel. Hopefully you can find that out. You can go and do some research on each individual too, so that you feel a little more like you know them, and also you can address them more, with that in mind. So
I think just real quick to add to that, I think that's an extremely important point, whether it's a one-on-one interview or a panel interview, making sure that you are doing that LinkedIn research to see who's actually interviewing you, to see if you have any commonality with that person, or even if you don't, just to be able to understand their background and who they are, because this is the person who's actually potentially hiring you for the job. I would even extend that to the company as well. when you do the research on the company, don't just research on the company website. Everyone does that. In this job market, the theme is you have to go above and beyond and do what the next candidate is not going to do. So, in order to do that in this particular space, I encourage people to go beyond the website, look at them, look at the company in the news to see what's going on with them in the news industry. Also, look at people on LinkedIn who are employed by the company and what are they talking about? What are they posting about? Do more in-depth research to go above and beyond the norm so that you can stand out in this job market.
I love that. And not only does that help you stand out, it helps you feel more confident when you go in there because you're a little more familiarized with everything. You know, I would love to, this topic is so broad and I could talk to you all day about, you know, everything from networking to salary negotiation. What do you feel, given that we have another 10 minutes here, are some of the things people most need to hear? And as an aside, I also wouldn't mind, you know, hearing how you might be using AI in all of this.
Sure. So first, mentioning AI, I think people need to embrace AI on two fronts. Number one, in your job search, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but also in your experience and your tool belt for your skills assessment. One of the most common questions that's being asked now in interviews is what is your experience with AI? How do you use AI? And how have you used it in this capacity as it relates to the job that you're applying for? You need to have an answer to that question. Now, I'm not saying you need to lie. If you don't have AI experience, you should not lie and say I'm an AI expert. So two things you need to do: get up to speed with AI. And there are lots of ways that you can do that very quickly while you're looking for a job that's cost effective and time effective. So you need to get up to speed with the use of AI as it relates to the industry and the target jobs you're applying for. But also you need to present an actual position of flexibility, showing the company that you know this much about it, but you're always open to learn more and to adopt it more into the job and into the role. So using AI in your experience and for the actual job you're applying for when you're speaking about it in an interview. Now, how should you use it in preparation for the job search? You can totally use AI to help tweak and perfect your responses, to help you do research. It is like an electronic technical assistant who's there for you. Now, people think that, oh, it doesn't take the place of humans. I totally agree. It does not have the capacity to think like a person and essentially put all the pieces together for you. It gives you the pieces. Your brain is your expertise and your knowledge of your career, the job you're applying for, and all the things that you know well, you're going to be the mastermind putting it all together. But AI can be a great research tool for you to give you those pieces, to give you that information, to cut down on some of the legwork on actually researching and learning how to respond to questions, learning information about the company, lots of different things you can use AI for. And I always tell people, just try it out. There's nothing wrong. If you put in something and it doesn't yield the response you're looking for, that's okay. But what if it does? So I would say definitely play around with it in your job search, utilize it. Just don't rely on it 100% because you have to still be the architect of your career and of your job search. But there's nothing wrong with using it as somewhat of an assistant in that process. So that's going to be the actual AI component. Now, what I also recommend for people, the top thing I would tell them now that they need to do, they need to make sure, you mentioned it earlier, networking. Networking sooner and more often when you don't actually need to network. Networking is an ongoing process. It's not something you do when you feel you quote unquote need it. You want it to feel organic. You want it to feel effortless. So it needs to be an ongoing process. There are so many ways, we can't get into them now because there's so many of them, but it's so many ways that you can network for the person who is an extrovert down to the person who's an introvert and just hates talking to people. There are ways you can network on LinkedIn that you can use if you're that introvert personality, even down to how you actually connect with people, the messaging that you use. We've almost become a bit robotic in our connection requests. They'll give you an option, connect or connect with the message. Everyone's like, just connect. They ignore the message. Why not just send the connection message and say, hey, I see we both went to Northwestern University and you're also in the legal field. Would love to connect with you and stay connected on LinkedIn. That's going to go a lot farther than the person who just robotically hit connect, connect, connect. That's a personalized message. And as I said before, people love commonality. So when you can show that you have something in common with an individual, they're going to be drawn to you even more. So my advice to your audience is to network more, network often, and do it organically so that it becomes effortless. So that when you feel you really need it, you've laid the foundation and everything is there for you.
Wow, those were great answers to both questions. And I love everything you said. And you did help drive home that point that networking is so important. And it really is. I'm always really sad when, somebody who's lost a 25-year job and they haven't been networking because they've been doing their job. And so they didn't think they needed to network. But if you do it consistently throughout your career, you never hit those pockets where you need those connections and you haven't been working on them, and now you have to stop and remake connections before you can really move forward and get any sort of support from these people.
And I'll actually, sorry to be there.
No, go.
I'll add, and I always tell people, I love telling people not just my success stories, but also my struggles and my fails. One of my big failures was I was the queen of networking when I was in the law firm culture, because my career progression was law firms, government, and corporate. When I was in the law firm culture, they breed networking.
Right.
Like everyone networks. When I got to the federal government, no one told me not to network, but there's just this atmosphere of you're going to have this job for a long time. There's no need for that. So my networking failed tremendously. I went down as far as the number of conferences I attended, LinkedIn, reach connections, just everything just slowly, declined to the point where I wasn't really networking at all. Then I decided I want to leave the federal government. And I'm like, wow, I've been doing this. And I'm the one who used to preach doing this all the time. So I just say that to one thing, humanize myself to your audience. Some of you may look at my LinkedIn profile and it may look so impressive, but let me also tell you the real side to all that. I'm human too, and I've made lots of mistakes. And that was one of my mistakes. But there are ways you can pivot and come out of that. But now once you get it back, you make sure that you continuously maintain it. And I'm never going to get in that position again. That's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. And probably it looks so great because of that. So yeah, we all have these mistakes that we make, but that's kind of how we learn. But I hate for people to have to learn that lesson too many times because somebody told me early on too, she was a banker. And of course, in the banking world, networking is also very important. And when I started my business, she kept saying, you have to network, you need to go network. And I had been in a corporate environment that didn't really require that. And, but she said something that really stuck with me all of these years, which was just go and have fun, make a friend. Like people put all this pressure on themselves around networking that it's supposed to be like, some big win at every networking event, and that's not really what it's about. So if you just kind of focus on, it's just really making connections with people
I totally agree.
Reasons. Yeah,
and that's one thing I learned in my own networking career. It's that I get to actually go and speak at these conferences. I applied to be they have a call for speakers period where you can actually apply to speak at a conference. So you get an opportunity to speak on your area of expertise. So it's enhancing your own network by actually speaking at these conferences. And you're right, I get to go to Florida, I get to go to New York, and the actual ticket to the event is paid. So I get to get in a room with other, innovative thinkers, thought leaders, experts in my field. So I'm learning from them. I'm enhancing my expertise, and I'm getting, an opportunity to be in New York or in Florida or wherever the conference is.
Yeah.
That's a good time. Don't pass it up, and it doesn't have to be stressful. You just go in, everyone's human. Just go in, have conversations, and you'll find that it's a lot easier the more that you actually do it.
Yeah, it is so true. And the other little tip, if you are an introvert, is to just ask them questions. People love to talk about themselves. So if you meet somebody who's interesting, just ask them more about, what they do and who they are, and you'll be in a great conversation and you'll be barely talking.
Yes, and I have one more tip for introverts, how they can actually navigate the conference space. So you can utilize technology in LinkedIn to do what you don't feel comfortable doing in the room. So you're going to this conference. So ahead of the conference, you go on LinkedIn and you make posts saying, "So excited, I'm going to be attending." Then you tag the conference. The sessions I'm most interested in seeing are, you identify those. Other people are going to then see your name on that post. You go to the conference, even if, let's say, you try to talk to a few people, your introvert nature kicks in, you only talk to 2 people. Let's not feel defeated. What we're going to do then is we're going to leave the conference, and we're going to go back to social media, back to LinkedIn, and now we're going to connect with all the speakers who we heard speak at the conference. We're going to send them a connection request. We're going to identify why we love their topic on whatever the, panel was about or whatever their talk was about. And then you're also going to tag the event and say, "Had a great time at conference, enjoy meeting so many great people." Now you're actually in the pool with the extroverts, but you really didn't talk a lot the event. So I encourage you to talk at the event. That's the goal, but don't leave defeated. If you don't do it, let social media and technology do what you didn't do in the room. Do it online.
Oh, I love that. Okay, that's such great advice. We are out of time. I'm so sad. This is such a fun topic. And so how can people reach out to you and get more of your wisdom on all of this?
Sure. So you can visit my website. It's corporatewinners.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn with my name, Katrice Miller. And I do apologize for my voice. I was just so excited to have this conversation, so I did not want to cancel. So thank you for having me and letting me still participate, even with my cold. But it really was a great conversation. And I'm so excited, for your audience to have someone like you to bring these topics forward. Knowledge is power, and you're providing this to your audience, giving them the resources and the tools they need to actually excel in this space, in their financial gains and in their career strategies. So kudos to you and thank you.
Thank you. That was very, very kind, and it was also kind of you to spend the time with us when you aren't feeling as well as you could. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate that. And you're really a wealth of knowledge in this area. And we had planned to discuss it. It didn't really come up, but your background in employment law doesn't hurt either when you're working. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of insight that you would have that somebody else would not. And so, you can help avoid some pitfalls and do a lot of other things as well. So,
and also with negotiating, I help clients with that from that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that topic too, especially for women. And in today's world, it's expected that you negotiate your salary. I don't know how it was 25 years ago, but right now, I think, and that's a whole other topic, and maybe we can have that conversation at another.
Yeah, I think we need to, because really quick, one point I want to tell women, I challenge women to look at the things that you enjoy doing. Women are so very much slower to monetize the things they enjoy doing and the things they're good at. If a woman feels I'm really good at this, it just comes naturally, let me just do it. Or, if I enjoy doing it, I'll just do it. You could be sitting on a side business right now. Not saying you have to leave your 9 to 5 job or your corporate path, but just something to add financial security to your actual career, or also just be the passion project. You can be passionate about it, enjoy it, and still monetize it and create extra income. Whole different conversation, but
Oh.
I really want women to think about that, because I was that woman. That's how career coaching started. I was actually coaching people for years because I enjoyed it and I was great at it, not actually putting a business behind it. So learn from my mistake, guys. Learn from my mistake.
That's great. And I hear that, that seems to be the way a lot of career coaches become career coaches, and they're doing it for their friends anyway. So it's like, wait, but I love that. And I love, today in this world, having some side extra income just gives you so much security, because the employment world is not as secure as it once was. So there's a couple things, though. Keeping up on these job search skills is huge, because that way you've got this toolkit, and when you do need another job, you know how to go out there and do this. And so even that, you want to stay on top of all of it. Really, it's a maintenance project once you do get a job. So anyway, we could keep talking forever here, but we'll stop, and I'll invite you back on. This is great.
Would love to come back anytime.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, Katrice, you were fantastic, and thank you so much for being here. And audience, I know you got a lot out of this, and I would really, suggest you share with your friends and family who might need to hear this show. I mean, there's a lot of people who want to hear it, and there's a lot of people who need to hear it because they're in the middle of some kind of a transition. So please share, and please rate and review and subscribe to the show, because we love bringing people like Katrice on, and we'd love to keep doing that. And the more people listening to the show, the easier that is. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.